I don't know if you ever pay attention to the opening prayer of the Mass, but it's interesting what we pray sometimes. Just take, for example, tonight's opening prayer. Almighty and merciful God, good start. Graciously keep from us all adversity. I like that. That's a good thing to pray for. I don't want any hassles. Keep all hassles, all difficulties, all annoyances away from me, so that, unhindered in mind and body alike, sweet, we may pursue in freedom of heart the things that are yours. You know, we make these prayers, but we really don't live like that. I mean, how many of us really live lives totally free of all adversity? You know, a life where we are free and strong in mind and body, unhindered. Just think, I wouldn't have to get my glasses to find my glasses. You know, I wouldn't have any of those hassles. So that my heart would be free to solely follow Jesus. Maybe. If he's a little bit more interesting. I mean, what is it that we're really praying about when we stand here? When you and I are here together, what are we really doing? For the past year, since about this time last year, we have been reading the Gospel of Mark. And you've heard Deacon Bill and I constantly go back to the same refrain. Somebody was joking this morning. Do you guys play off of each other? Yeah, we do. There is this refrain in the Gospel of Mark that the disciples don't get it. The good, faithful people that always show up miss the point. Because here's Jesus, this wonder worker. He comes in, you know, and he cures the person who can't see, and the person who's lame can now walk, and the hungry, they now have something to eat. This is good. I want to follow this guy. He's the new Messiah. He's the wonder worker. I'd be up there saying, you know, yeah, I do want to sit on your right-hand side. I do want to sit on your left. This looks good. And Jesus keeps on looking at them and saying, you don't get it. That's not what this is about. And that's why he keeps on saying, see those blind people over there? They get it. You don't. See those lame people over there? They get it. You don't. Remember, in the time of Jesus, physical illness, lameness, blindness, speech impediment, whatever, was considered a punishment for sin. So pointing them out as a blind person or a lame person was the same thing as pointing them out as public sinners. And Jesus says, they get it, and you don't. Same in our gospel passage today. The scribes, they don't get it. And put next to them is the widow, who very simply and very cleanly gives everything. Remember, we're in the 12th chapter. The reading that we have in our gospel today is from the end of chapter 12 of Mark. Jesus is already in Jerusalem for the last time. The next thing that's going to happen is the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus. He's at the end of his life. We are on the 32nd Sunday of Ordinary Time. We're at the end of the church year. 2 more weeks is the final exam, the Feast of Christ the King. There are only 34 Sundays in the church year. And then we switch over to the Gospel of Luke. And so the church looks at us and says, did you get it? Have you been following this? Have you been reflecting on this? Have you been wrestling with the tough questions that are here? Because in fact, what Jesus says is that in order for you to genuinely be my disciple, you must embrace the cross with me. Because he goes in the Gospel of Mark, he goes into Jerusalem not as the triumphant king, but as the suffering servant. There is a cost to discipleship. But it's interesting because Jesus does what he does, not the Father says to him, you, go, die. And many of us, when we look at religion, we're here, let's face it, we're here very often on Sunday because if we don't, we're going to go to hell. You know, we're here in obedience. We're doing as we were told. And yet, discipleship is not that. Discipleship, what you and I are called to, is a response. A response to first being loved. And then that love calls for everything. I was flying home on Friday, and there were two guys sitting in the plane in front of me, carrying on a very loud conversation, two younger guys, talking about the fact that they were, I would say, fairly recently married. Both of them had very little kids, very young kids. And one of the guys was saying that his son knew that he wasn't going to be there for Halloween. And so he wanted to know, Dad, do you want to see my costume? And he said, sure, come ahead. And so they were talking back and forth, and he said, and my son came out, and he says, Dad, you know who my favorite superhero is? He looked at the costume, he said, Spider-Man? He goes, no, it's you. And then he looked at his friend, and he said, made my day. My bet is it made his life. I think many of you, married, grandparents, parents, all of us, I'm sure, at one time or another, have been in love. Remember that moment. What was it like to know that someone loved you? How did it feel walking home that day? What went through your heart and your mind? Is there anything you wouldn't give that person? Is there anything you wouldn't do for that person, knowing that they loved you? That's discipleship. The cost of discipleship is not a burden that we bear. It is a response that we give. Having first been loved by our God, knowing that we are loved, we respond with everything. What do you want? You got it. You want the last 2 cents I got? You got it. You want my life? You got it. Because then we can go with Jesus into Jerusalem, embrace the cross, knowing that in embracing the cross, we are also revealing hope for the world. It's in that ultimate act of love that hope is finally revealed in the resurrection, in new life, in courage, and in sacrifice. And so we come to the end, almost 2 more weeks of our church year, conscious of the fact that we have been walking with Jesus, wrestling with the things that he's been teaching. And now it comes down to the final act. Can we embrace the cost of discipleship? Can we embrace the cross with Jesus Christ? Do we get it? Or are we still back there arguing who's going to sit on the right, who's going to sit on the left? The choice is ours.